Have you ever walked into your own home and found your wife in the bathtub with your brother-in-law? I came home early that Thursday morning in Springfield, Ohio, boots still wet from the rain. I cracked open the bathroom door, steam hitting my face, and then the smell of Lisa's bubble bath. And there they were, my wife of 24 years, and Todd, my brother-in-law, naked, tangled up in my damn bathtub like they paid the mortgage. I didn't yell. Men my age don't waste breath on that. I just shut off the faucet, slipped off my wedding ring, set it on the sink, and walked away. Then I went downstairs, locked the front door, and called his wife. You need to come here. You need to see this with your own eyes. If you've ever felt your world flip upside down, follow me, hit subscribe, stick around, and tell me I'm not the only one who's lived through something like this. To understand how I ended up staring at that bathtub, you've got to go back to that same Thursday morning on Pinecrest Drive. I was 56, born and raised in Springfield, Ohio, and I honestly thought the wildest part of my life was already behind me. It was barely light out. The radio on the counter muttered about more rain rolling through, some guy complaining about flooded basements. Lisa sat at the kitchen table in her robe, one hand around her coffee mug, the other scrolling her phone. No good morning kiss, no smile, just caffeine, headlines, and the weather. That was us lately. We didn't fight much. We didn't laugh much either. Mostly we just traded updates about the forecast and whose turn it was to grab milk. 24 years boiled down to shared weather reports and the sound of spoons tapping ceramic. She said she'd only be working a half day. Todd's swinging by later to look at that leaky faucet upstairs, she added casual. But there was this tiny shift in her face when she said his name, a quick little smile that wasn't for me. I noticed it, and I ignored it. That was the first crack in the glass, and I looked away. But that wasn't the first thing I should have noticed, not by a long shot. Back then, if you'd asked me who I was, I'd have given you a simple answer. I was the steady guy at Riverline Manufacturing. 15 years as maintenance lead on the east side of town. I kept the machines running, the floor guys safe, and the boss off everybody's back. I'm not the loud one. I'm not the raise hell in the parking lot type. I'm the quiet one. The man who shows up early, stays late when he has to, and doesn't make a scene. I'm the quiet type, not a yeller. That's how I'd have put it. My whole life was built on 3 rules. Pay the bills, keep the lights on, try to do the right thing. Nothing fancy. Just show up, take care of your own, and don't give people a reason to hang their head when they say your name. There was a time when Lisa's laughter filled our house. Church potlucks at St. Mark's, Christmas Eve with too many people and not enough chairs, her hand finding mine under the table. Somewhere along the way, that faded into nods across the room and separate screens glowing at night. I figured that was just the back half of life. You stop chasing fireworks and start hoping for a little peace. I honestly thought we were a team. But teams fall apart quietly, long before anyone hears the crash. The funny thing is, that day didn't start out special. It started with a machine screaming. Late morning at Riverline, one of the big presses on the east side let out this awful metal-on-metal shriek and then just died. You could feel it in your teeth. Guys stepped back, hands in the air. We killed the power and I climbed in with my crew, checking belts, motors, bearings, all the usual suspects. Didn't matter what we touched. The part we needed was shot, and the replacement was stuck somewhere on a truck that wouldn't show up till tomorrow. My supervisor came over, rubbing his neck. We're dead in the water till tomorrow. Send who you can home. Go on home yourself, Hank. I'm not paying you to stand around. At 56, you don't get many surprise half-days. Most of your life is routine, punch in, punch out. That little empty space in the middle of a Thursday felt rare. On the drive out of the lot, I thought, maybe I'll surprise Lisa with lunch. Just the 2 of us. No TV, no phones. Maybe we can still find our way back a little. I swung by Kroger, picked up tomato soup and a loaf of good bread, picturing us at the kitchen table, rain tapping the window, a quiet meal that didn't feel so empty. I had no idea I'd just decided to walk straight into the end of my old life. What was waiting for me at home was worse than anything I could imagine. I pulled out of the Kroger lot and headed back through Springfield, wipers ticking back and forth, fighting the fall rain. The streets had that slick, dark shine to them. Little one-story houses lined the side roads, front porches sagging just a bit, pickups parked nose first in gravel driveways. Kids' bikes lay on their sides in front yards, already wet. It was the kind of town where everybody knows which factory you work at and what you drive, but not always what you're carrying around inside. I passed the old Walmart on the edge of town, the one they'd shut down a few years back. Big gray box, empty parking lot, faded signs still hanging there like a lie. It used to be packed on Saturdays. Now it just sat there, hollowed out, taking up space. I caught myself thinking, that's what our marriage feels like, big once, busy once. Busy. Then one day you look up and realize the lights are off and nobody bothered to tell you when they closed the doors. I thought about all the years I'd worked overtime, skipped vacations, came home bone-tired but on time. I kept waiting for us to find our way back, like maybe they'd flip the lights on at that store again someday and pretend nothing had happened. The rain eased a little as I turned onto Pinecrest Drive. I remember thinking, at least home is still my safe place. I was wrong. Dead wrong. And the proof was upstairs waiting for me. By the time I turned onto Pinecrest, the rain had eased to a light tap on the windshield. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there a second, listening to the metal tick as it cooled and the soft patter of rain on the hood. Home. That word still meant something to me then. I grabbed the Kroger bag, went up the steps, and pushed the front door open. The house smelled like coffee that had gone lukewarm. I set the bag on the kitchen counter, right where I pictured that quiet lunch happening. The little radio by the stove was on low, playing some tired classic rock from the 70s. A song I'd heard 1,000 times, suddenly sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Lisa?" I called out. Nothing. No "yeah" from down the hall. No footsteps. Just the guitar on the radio and the faint hum of the fridge. The place didn't feel empty. It felt wrong. Like I'd walked into a room right after somebody stopped talking trash about me. The air had weight to it. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but my gut had already gone quiet in that way it does right before bad news lands. And when a man my age feels that kind of quiet, something bad is coming. I was standing there in the kitchen, hand on the back of a chair, when I heard it. Water. Not the sharp, annoying drip of that leaky faucet Lisa kept complaining about. This was a steady rush, the sound of a bathtub filling upstairs. Full blast. At first I thought, maybe she decided to take a bath before work. That would have been normal enough. But then I heard something else under the water. A laugh. Not loud, not carefree. The kind of laugh people make when they're trying not to be heard. A man's voice, low, blurred by distance and drywall. Then Lisa's voice, softer than it had been at that kitchen table that morning. At my age, you don't jump to conclusions, I told myself. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You assume there's a good explanation. But there was this cold line working its way down my spine, like somebody had unzipped me right between the shoulder blades. I tightened my grip on the chair, took one slow breath, then another. And then I started up the stairs one step at a time, each one heavier than the last. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was dim except for one slice of yellow light spilling out from the bathroom door, cracked just an inch. Steam drifted into the hall, rolling slow, carrying that lavender scent Lisa liked. It used to mean, she's home, she's safe. This time, it just made my stomach turn. I stopped in front of the door and put my hand on the knob. My heart wasn't racing. It was too quiet for that. I'm not a yeller, I told myself. I'm the quiet type. Whatever's on the other side of this, I'm going to meet it standing up. The knob turned easy. The hinge let out this soft little creak, nothing dramatic, but it sounded to me like something cracking open that you can't ever close again. The steam parted just enough. Lisa, Todd, skin, soap bubbles clinging to shoulders, knees, the edge of the tub. Her eyes blown wide, his face red, a washcloth clutched like it could save him. For half a second, nobody moved. The faucet kept running, their mouths were open, but there were no words yet, and in that frozen heartbeat, my whole life rearranged itself. But the fallout, that was the real shock. Lisa screamed first. Not from pain, just that panicked high sound people make when they realize the game is over. She grabbed for the shower curtain, for a towel, for anything to hide behind. Todd's face went from red to white. "Hank, this isn't," he started, voice cracking. I didn't answer him. I didn't look either of them in the eye for more than a second or two. I just reached past them, my arm steady, and turned off the faucet. The rush of water stopped, and in the silence all you could hear was their breathing and the drip from the spout. At 56, you don't have the energy for throwing things and punching walls. That's movie stuff. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the steady one. I wasn't about to stop now. I slipped my wedding ring off my finger, felt the groove it had worn into my skin. Then I set it on the edge of the sink. It made this small, sharp tap against the porcelain that sounded, to me, exactly like a door closing. "Don't go anywhere," I said quietly. Then I turned around, walked out of that bathroom, and pulled the door shut behind me. What I did next surprised even me. I walked back down the stairs like a man coming down from a roof he never wanted to climb in the first place. The house sounded different now. Same walls, same furniture, but everything had a hollow echo to it. In the kitchen, the Kroger bag was still sitting there on the counter, soup and bread waiting on a version of my life that no longer existed. The radio was still playing that same classic rock station, like the world hadn't gotten the memo. I set my hands on the counter, took one breath, then another, walked to the front door, and slid the deadbolt shut. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. Maybe some part of me wanted the battlefield contained. I pulled my phone out and scrolled to Megan Blake. For a second, my thumb hovered. Then I hit call. She picked up on the second ring, bright at first. "Hey, Hank, what's—" "Megan," I cut in, and I barely recognized my own voice. "You need to come over. You need to see this yourself." There was a pause. I could hear keys, movement. Her voice came back different, lower, harder. "I'm on my way, and I'm not coming alone." I didn't know it yet, but those words would flip the whole story. After I hung up, I didn't pace. I didn't tear the place apart. I just pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down like it was any other tired evening. The ring was still upstairs on the sink, but I could feel the absence of it on my finger, that pale band of skin where it had lived for 24 years. I stared at the empty spot like it was a hole straight through my hand. On the counter, the radio guy had moved on from music to talking about potholes on Main Street and some council meeting I'd never go to. Normal life, humming along, while mine had just been split clean down the middle. I realized I wasn't shaking. I wasn't hot. Everything in me had gone still, like the air in the house before a Midwest storm hits. Little memories started lining up. Lisa helping Megan with paperwork late. Lisa laughing at something Todd texted. The extra care with her hair before just running errands. Maybe the signs were there, I thought. I just didn't want to believe I'd been made a fool of. Then I heard it. Tires crunching slow on the wet driveway. The first car had arrived, and with it, the first witness to the truth. Didn't take long. A car door slammed outside, hard enough to rattle the front window. The front door flew open, and Megan stepped in like she'd been shot out of a cannon, hair damp from the rain, eyes already wild. "Where is she?" she yelled, not even looking at me yet. I stood up slow. "Hall bathroom," I said, pointing upstairs. My voice came out low, flat. That's when I noticed the woman standing just behind her. Mid-40s, gray blazer, dark jeans, leather folder tucked under one arm. Calm eyes. The kind of calm that doesn't come from not caring, but from having seen this exact mess 100 times before. She gave me a small nod. "You must be Hank." I just nodded back. Whatever was about to happen, I knew she was on our side. Megan didn't wait for introductions. She hit those stairs fast, footsteps sharp, fueled by 20 years of marriage and however long her gut had been whispering that something wasn't right. The other woman, Denise, I'd learned, followed slower, watching, taking it all in like evidence. I brought up the rear. Halfway up, the first scream ripped out of that bathroom. And that scream wasn't even the start of the chaos. By the time I reached the hall, Megan was planted in the doorway of that bathroom like a guard dog. One hand on the frame, the other pointing straight at Todd, who was now wrapped in a towel, shaking. "You filthy bastard," she said, voice trembling but clear. "How long?" Lisa was in her robe, hair dripping, tears already streaming down her face. Real, fake, rehearsed. I couldn't tell anymore. "This isn't what it looks like," she sobbed. "Please, just let us explain." Todd stretched a hand toward Megan. "Sweetheart, please." He didn't get any further. The woman in the gray blazer stepped past me, into that heavy, wet air. "Nobody say another word," she said, level and firm. "No shouting, no drama, just control." She opened her folder, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures. Tub, steam, towels, faces, click, click, click. The room went dead quiet except for the tiny sound of that camera shutter and the drip from the faucet. Standing there, I realized something important. I wasn't just watching my marriage fall apart, I was watching the record being made. Evidence. And for the first time since I opened that door, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't walk away from this completely powerless. But the next thing Denise revealed changed everything. We all stood there in that cramped bathroom like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Steam on the mirror, wet footprints on the tile, shame hanging heavier than the humidity. Denise slipped her phone back into her pocket and turned to me first, like none of the noise around us mattered. "Hank," she said, "how long were you downstairs before you called Megan?" I had to think about it. Time was strange right then. 10 minutes, I said. Maybe a little more. She nodded once. "Good. A judge will like that. You didn't act in anger. You cooled off and then called the other spouse. That matters." Behind her, Todd had managed to get hold of his phone from the sink. I saw his thumbs moving fast, panic texting somebody. Megan snatched it right out of his hand. She glanced at the screen and let out this bitter half-laugh. "Oh, look," she said. "He sent Hank a selfie, wrapped in my wife's towel." She held the phone out to Denise. Denise looked at the picture, her mouth pulling into a small, sharp smile. "At our age," she said quietly, "revenge isn't yelling. It's paperwork." And for the first time that day, I almost wanted to laugh. But the real revenge hadn't even started. Lisa must have heard something shift in me because that's when she changed her angle. She stepped closer, fingers reaching for my forearm. "Hank, please," she said, voice softening. "We can fix this. Counseling, whatever it takes, we can work through it." Before I could answer, Megan snapped. "He found you in the tub, Lisa. With my husband. You don't work through that." Lisa turned on her. "You don't understand." Denise cut in, tone like a gavel. "Let's not cheapen the word mistake. This is not a wrong turn out of the parking lot. This is a pattern." The word pattern landed hard. The bath, the towel, the texts, the way Lisa smiled when she said Todd's name that morning. Something clicked inside me. Not a crack this time, more like a switch. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to stand in that bathroom and argue about what I'd clearly seen with my own eyes. I looked at Lisa, really looked at her, and realized she'd left our marriage long before I opened that door. "I'm leaving," I said. "You won't hear from me tonight." And then I turned my back on all three of them and walked out of my own house like a man who finally understood it wasn't home anymore, and I was about to learn what freedom feels like. When I walked out of that house, I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove without thinking too hard, let the truck find its own way through the wet streets until I ended up where men like me always seem to end up when the world falls apart. American Legion Post 144 off Maple. Rain was still misting down when I went in. The place smelled like old wood, cheap beer, and fried something. I took a stool in the back corner and ordered a Bud Light because I didn't have the energy to choose anything else. On the TV above the bar, a ball game played. Cubs down by 3, crowd noise low. At a nearby table, a couple of old vets were trading Vietnam stories, laughing that rough, broken kind of laugh that only comes from people who've seen worse than they can explain. I didn't join in. I just sat there, listening, feeling the edges of my own disaster soften a little in the noise of theirs. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely on an island. At 56, sometimes not alone is the best you can ask for. I didn't go home after the Legion. Home wasn't home anymore. Instead, I pointed the truck toward I-70 and pulled into the Sunrise Motor Inn, the kind of roadside place you pass 1,000 times without really seeing. Neon sign half burned out, buzzing, paint peeling, rooms cheap by the hour or the night. The clerk barely looked up. I paid cash, took the key, and walked into a room that smelled like old smoke and cleaning chemicals. Thin curtains that didn't quite close, a lumpy spring mattress that sagged in the middle, heater ticking in the corner like it had its own bad heart. I laid down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally ran me over. Morning came with that gray light that makes everything look worse. For a few seconds I didn't remember. Then the bathtub, the towel, their faces, all of it slammed back into place. I checked my phone. Missed calls from Lisa, a couple from Todd, and one text from Megan. Call me. Denise has ideas. I sat on the edge of that sagging bed and realized something. Doing nothing felt worse than walking straight into whatever came next. So I took a breath and hit call. After I talked to Megan and Denise, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to that house. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So I drove over to Ramirez Auto Parts and Service on North Limestone. Joe and I go back a long way. He's the guy I've always trusted with my truck. He took one look at my face when I walked in, wiped his hands on a rag, and didn't bother with small talk. You need a place to stay? He asked. All I could do was nod. He jerked his thumb toward the back. Take the studio upstairs. Don't worry about rent right now. We'll work it out later. The room was small. One bed, a little kitchenette, bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The window looked out over North Limestone, cars rolling by, muffler rattles and distant horns. I sat down on the edge of the bed and listened to the quiet between the sounds of traffic and tools clanking in the shop below. For the first time since that bathroom door opened, nobody wanted anything from me. Nobody was lying to my face. That kind of quiet felt like a gift. A day later, we met at Maple Street Diner. Me, Megan, and Denise. Place smelled like burnt coffee, bacon grease, and every conversation that had ever been had in those booths. I slid into the seat across from them. Denise didn't waste time. She pulled a thin stack of papers from her folder and laid them in front of me. Bank statements, she said. Joint account activity. At first glance, it looked like nothing. Little withdrawals, 20 here, 40 there. But then I saw the pattern. Same credit union, same dates. And one name that kept showing up on the other end. Todd Blake. Denise tapped a line with her pen. This is your money, Hank. Dripping out bit by bit into an account he controls. It hit me in a different place than the bathtub had. Lower, heavier. They weren't just cheating on my heart. They were dipping into my life savings. Megan's jaw was clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. He told me he was short because of car repairs, she said. I paid for half those repairs. I sat there staring at those numbers and realized the betrayal went deeper than a body in a tub. They'd been robbing the life I thought I was building. But the next piece of evidence, that one cut the deepest. We sat there in that booth at Maple Street Diner, the three of us staring at those bank statements like they were crime scene photos. I thought Denise was done, but she reached back into her folder and pulled out something small, careful, like it might fall apart. A burned scrap of cardstock. I found this under your bathroom sink when Megan and I were there, she said, sliding it toward me. Figured you'd want to see it. The edges were black and curled like somebody tried to get rid of it in a hurry. In the middle, just enough of Lisa's handwriting had survived. Just like we joked about that summer in Galena. My stomach clenched. We never went to Galena, I said. Not once. Megan stared at the scrap. Her voice went flat. Todd and Lisa took my sister's kids there. 6 years ago. Long weekend. I stayed home to work extra shifts. Nobody talked after that. Even the clatter of dishes around us felt far away. Up until then, part of me wanted to believe this was some stupid recent lapse. One bad day. But that burned card on the table said otherwise. This wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. And it had been going on for years. A pattern that had been alive for years, right under our noses. Denise let the silence sit for a while. Then she gathered the papers into a neat stack, lining up the edges like she was organizing the wreckage. All right, she said. We know what they've done to you. The question is what you want to do about it. I shrugged, suddenly tired. What is there to do? Get a divorce? Split what's left? Try to sleep at night? She studied me. You go to St. Mark's, right? Yeah, I said. Been there most of my life. Any family events coming up? I thought for a second. Lisa's nephew's confirmation party. Next week. Big thing. Whole family. Church friends. Food in the fellowship hall. Megan snorted. Perfect. They humiliated us behind closed doors. She looked up, eyes hard. Why should they get to keep their nice little image? Denise nodded slowly. We don't scream. We don't throw punches. We present the truth. Calmly, legally, in front of the people whose opinions they care about most. Something in that clicked. This wasn't about making a scene. It was about getting my dignity back. Ours. For once, they'd be the ones standing in the ugly light, and I wouldn't have to raise my voice to put them there. And they never saw it coming. Denise leaned back in that diner booth and looked me dead in the eye. Hank, listen to me, she said. Lisa thrives on drama. If you yell, she wins. I knew exactly what she meant. I'd seen that move before. The sudden tears, the shaking hands, the way every argument somehow ended with everyone rushing to comfort her while whatever we were talking about quietly got buried. She'll cry, she'll spin it, she'll turn herself into the victim, Denise went on. You raise your voice, you give her everything she needs. So what do? I asked. You stay calm, she said. You let the facts speak, let the truth do the shouting. It hit me then. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. It was strategy. I wasn't just some blind-sided husband. I was a man walking into a battlefield, and the only weapon I had was self-control. I took a slow breath, let it out. I can do calm, I said. I've been doing calm my whole life. Megan reached across the table and put a hand on my shoulder. You're not alone in this, she said. Not anymore. And for the first time since everything blew up, I believed her. That week before the confirmation party stretched out like a bad highway, straight, gray, and seeming longer the further you went. Every night I sat by the window of that little studio over Joe's garage, looking down at North Limestone Street. Headlights sliding by, people going home from work, picking up kids, living normal lives. Some nights I cried. Quiet, ugly tears I wouldn't let anyone see. Other nights I just sat there numb, feeling nothing at all, like somebody had turned the dimmer switch all the way down inside me. Denise called almost every evening. She'd walk me through the plan again, what she'd show, what she'd say, what I didn't have to. Steady, professional, like she was tightening bolts on a bridge we were about to drive across. Megan called too. At first she was all fire and rage, but as the days went by, her voice changed. Less shaking, more steel. Two people who'd both been hit by the same truck, comparing bruises in the dark. At some point I realized we were two people who walked through the same fire, different houses, same flames. And under everything, one sentence kept looping in my head over and over. 24 years, and this is where I ended up. A couple days before the confirmation party, I did something I didn't expect to do in the middle of all this mess. I went to church, not on Sunday, just a random afternoon. St. Mark's was quiet, lights low, that familiar smell of old wood and coffee from a pot that had been on since morning. I found Pastor Ben Miller in his office, sorting through bulletins. He looked up, saw my face, and didn't ask for details. What's going on, Hank? I sat down and stared at my hands. I'm not here for counseling, I said. I just need to ask you one thing. He waited. Is it wrong for me to show up? I said. At the confirmation, knowing what I know, knowing what we're planning to do. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me like he was weighing more than just my words. Finally he said, if your presence is honest, not vengeful, truth doesn't have to hide. Something loosened in my chest. I didn't need him to bless every detail. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy for wanting the truth out in the open. When I walked back outside, the sky over Springfield looked a little clearer. The situation hadn't changed. But I had. The day of the confirmation party, I woke up over Joe's garage with a knot in my stomach and the kind of calm that feels too steady. I went home to change. The house was quiet, like it was holding its breath. I pulled out a clean shirt, ran an iron over it slow, watching the wrinkles disappear one by one. Wiped down my good boots, the ones I usually only wore to church and funerals. Funny how those two started to feel similar. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. Same face, same gray at the temples. But the man looking back wasn't the husband trying to keep the peace anymore. He looked like someone who'd been hit hard and was still standing. I took the folder Denise had given me, copies of bank statements, that burned card, screenshots, and slid them into the inside pocket of my shirt. Not weapons, just truth. On the drive to St. Mark's, the radio was back to talking about chance of showers and high school football scores, the world acting like it was just another Sunday. I pulled into the church lot and parked under a big maple tree, turned off the engine. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady. I didn't feel brave, I just felt done running from what I knew. The fellowship hall at St. Mark's smelled like every church event I'd ever been to. Meatballs and sauce, potato salad, coffee that had been sitting a little too long. Blue and white balloons were tied to folding chairs. Long tables lined the walls, covered in plastic tablecloths and crock-pots plugged into power strips. Normal, comforting even, if you didn't know what was coming. I stepped inside and took it in. Lisa was over by the food tables with a circle of church women, laughing like nothing in her life had ever gone sideways. She had on that soft blue dress she always saved for family events. When she saw me, her smile stuttered, just for a heartbeat. Our eyes met, and the air between us tightened. Todd stood a few feet away talking to one of her cousins, dress shirt, nice slacks, doing his best impression of a decent man. When he noticed me, the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost, and in a way, he had. The version of me he thought would stay quiet was dead. Megan appeared at my side a moment later, shoulders squared, chin up, like a soldier taking her position. Behind us, Denise walked in, calm as ever, leather folder tucked under her arm. No drama, just purpose. The storm was already in the room. Nobody else knew it yet. It was time to open the floodgates. Soon enough, Pastor Ben called everyone to gather around the front. Kids shuffled into place, parents wiped faces, grandparents leaned on chairs. He started talking about faith, about growing up, about what it meant for a young man to take ownership of his beliefs. I heard the words, but my focus was somewhere else. On the weight of the papers in my inside pocket, on the steady breathing of Megan standing next to me, on Lisa's eyes flicking toward us every few seconds. Megan glanced at me once, took a deep breath, and I knew. This was it. No more planning, just doing. Pastor Ben began to wrap up, thanking everyone for coming, blessing the food. There was that little pause before people clap and start moving toward the buffet. That's when Megan's voice cut through the room. "Pastor," she said, louder than I'd ever heard her, "we need a moment." Every head turned. Forks hovered over plates. Lisa hissed from across the room. "Megan, not here." Her face had gone tight, eyes already wetting up on cue. Megan didn't back down. Her voice shook just a little, but it was hard as nails. "Oh yes," she said, "here." And just like that, the whole atmosphere in that church hall flipped, from celebration to something else entirely. And we were only getting started. After Megan's "here," the room went tight and quiet, like everyone was holding the same breath. That's when Denise stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "In the interest of honesty," she said, "there are some things Hank and Megan would like to share." She opened her leather folder and pulled out a sheet of glossy paper, held it up chest high. From where I was standing, I didn't have to see it up close. I knew that image by heart. Steam, tile, Lisa's wet hair, Todd's stupid face, both of them wrapped in towels they hadn't earned. Someone near the front let out a sharp gasp. A fork clattered against a plate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Lisa's mask cracked. "Give me that," she yelled, rushing toward Denise, hand outstretched. Denise simply shifted her weight, stepped aside, and lifted the photo higher so more people could see. No dramatics, just the truth, held up under fluorescent church lights. In that moment, there was no spin left. No, it's not what it looks like. Everybody in that hall saw exactly what it was. But the money trail hit even harder. If it had just been the picture, maybe they could have tried to call it a one-time lapse. A stupid, shameful moment. Denise didn't give them that option. She moved to the nearest table, spread out a set of printed bank statements, and turned one page toward the crowd. Her pen tapped down the columns. "Over the last year," she said evenly, "small withdrawals from Hank and Lisa's joint account. $20 here, $40 there, each one ending up in an account in Todd Blake's name." She read off a few dates, a few amounts. It wasn't about the numbers, it was about the pattern. Then she picked up the burned scrap of card and held it between her fingers. And this was found under their bathroom sink. Her voice stayed calm as she read, just like we joked about that summer in Galena. My jaw tightened. We never went to Galena, I said, loud enough for people to hear. Megan's eyes didn't leave Todd. But they did, she said. Together. You could feel it hit the room, the length of it, the planning, the years. This wasn't an accident. It was a long-running affair, funded with our money. And karma was about to slip on something red. You could feel the room turning on them, and panic finally caught up with Todd. He lurched forward toward Denise, hand reaching for the folder like if he just grabbed the papers he could shove all of this back into the dark. "Give me that," he barked, louder than he probably meant to. In his rush, he didn't see the corner of the buffet table, or the giant glass bowl of cherry jello Mrs. Parker had brought, piled high with whipped cream and fruit like a red mountain. His shin hit the table leg. The whole thing shook. The bowl slid, tipped, and then gravity did what gravity does. Jello went flying. Todd's feet went out from under him, and he hit the tile flat on his back, covered from collarbone to belt in red gelatin and whipped cream, papers fluttering down around him like some cruel kind of confetti. The room went dead quiet. A couple people slapped hands over their mouths. I saw Pastor Ben close his eyes and murmur something that might have been a prayer. Then Mrs. Parker, 80-something and hard of hearing, leaned to her friend and said a little too loud, "Well, about time somebody stood up to those two." I'm not proud of it, but I almost smiled. But the real punch was next, and it wasn't physical. While Todd was still trying to scrape jello off his shirt, I saw a deputy step forward from the crowd, a cousin of Megan's I'd seen at holidays. He kept his voice low but clear as he handed Todd a folded set of documents. "Mr. Blake," he said, "you'll want to read those. Financial investigation. You'll be hearing from the county." Lisa spun away from him and locked onto me instead. Her eyes were full now, tears right on cue. "You didn't have to humiliate me like this," she said. "Not here, not in front of everyone." For most of my life, that's the moment I would have caved. I would have looked at my boots, mumbled something, tried to smooth it over so everybody could go back to pretending. Not this time. I met her eyes and held them. I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't humiliate you, Lisa," I said. "You did that yourself the day you forgot what 24 years meant. I just stopped covering for it." You could have heard a pin drop. Forks, chairs, whispers. Everything froze. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing up straight. And with that, I was done being the quiet one. After that line, I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I'd seen enough. They could have the whispers and the excuses. That was theirs to deal with now. I turned and walked toward the doors of the fellowship hall. Behind me, chairs scraped, voices rose, somebody called my name. I kept going. When I pushed the doors open, the sound dropped off like someone turned down the volume. Outside, the air was cool and clean. The grass out front was still damp, and I could smell the flower beds along the sidewalk. Mulch, wet dirt, something faint and sweet. I took a long breath all the way down, and for the first time in a long time, it came back out easy. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt free. I walked across the lot to my truck, listening to the quiet. No yelling, no lies, just the creak of the old suspension as I climbed in. When I shut the door, the muffled thud and the stillness inside the cab felt like a blessing. For 24 years, I'd been carrying a weight I didn't have a name for. That night, a good chunk of it finally slid off. But the legal hit the next morning sealed everything. The next morning came early and gray. Instead of heading to the plant, I met Denise at the Clark County Courthouse. There was nothing dramatic about it. No shouting, no slammed doors, just forms, signatures, copies. Denise moved through it like she'd done it 1,000 times. Divorce petition, asset lists, making sure my name stayed tied to the house I'd worked my whole life to pay for, protecting my pension, lining things up so Lisa's choices didn't cost me the rest of my years. We stepped out onto the courthouse steps when it was done, papers tucked under her arm. People passed by on their own business, barely noticing us. "You handled yourself with dignity last night," she said. "Not many people your age could have done that." I shook my head. I didn't feel dignified, I told her. I just felt numb. She gave a small, tired smile. Sometimes that's what dignity looks like, Hank. Staying steady while everything else cracks. I didn't say much after that, but walking back to my truck, I realized something. I couldn't control what Lisa and Todd had done, but I could control how I walked away from it, and something inside me finally shifted. That afternoon, after court, I was back over Joe's garage, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, when my phone buzzed. It was Megan. Her voice sounded worn out but lighter somehow, like someone who'd finally finished lifting something too heavy. "He's packing his stuff," she said. "Todd, I told him I want him out today, not next week. Today." I could picture it. His clothes in trash bags, his tools in boxes, his whole fake life getting hauled down a driveway he'd once strutted up. There was a pause, then she said, "I wanted to say thank you. You stood there with me last night. That mattered." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just said, "You stood there with me too." She let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. "Maybe coffee sometime," she said. "Not a date, just two people who survived the same storm." I felt the corner of my mouth lift for real. "I'd like that," I said, because whatever came next, it helped to know I wasn't the only one crawling out of the wreckage. A few weeks later, the legal gears had turned enough that one thing was settled. The house on Pinecrest Drive was mine, on paper and in truth. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside alone. No suitcase, no fanfare, just me and the echo. The place was quieter than I remembered. Some of Lisa's touches were gone, her pictures, her throw blankets, the little decorative junk I never liked anyway. What was left felt stripped down, bare, but it also felt more like mine than it had in years. I walked through each room slowly, opening every window I passed, letting the October air move through the hallways, lifting curtains that hadn't really stirred since all this began. They billowed a little, like the house was finally exhaling. When I reached the hallway bathroom, I stopped. Hand on the doorframe, heart steady. This was the crime scene. The picture in my head. The place my old life ended. I stepped inside, looked at the tub, the sink, the mirror. It all looked smaller now, just porcelain and tile. For the first time, the memory stung, but it didn't crush me. In that bathroom, I bent down to check under the sink. Old habit, I guess, looking for leaks. Instead, my hand hit fabric. I pulled it out and just stared. The pink floral towel. The same one Todd had wrapped himself in that day, dripping and panicked, in the picture he was dumb enough to text me. For a second, the memory rushed back. The steam, his face, Lisa grabbing at curtains. But this time, it didn't feel like a knife. More like a bruise someone pressed on. It hurt, but it didn't own me. I stood there a moment, holding that towel. I could have ripped it in half. I could have taken it out back and burned it. Instead, I folded it. Slow, neat, like I was packing up something that no longer belonged here. Slid it into a brown paper bag. Then I drove across town to the VFW, to the big metal donation box out front where they collect clothes and blankets. I dropped the bag in, heard it land with a dull thud. It wasn't mine to carry anymore, I thought. And just like that, I let it go. Life didn't bounce back with some big moment. It came back in small ones. I started cooking for myself again. Not frozen dinners, not takeout, real food. My mother used to make this meatloaf on Tuesday nights. Crispy edges, sweet ketchup glaze. I decided to try and remember how. First attempt was a brick. Second one was closer, but still off. Third time, it came out of the oven looking right. Edges browned, juice bubbling at the corners, the whole kitchen smelling like my childhood. I cut a good slice, put it on a plate, and on a whim, walked next door to Mr. Walter's place, the old widower who'd been living alone since his wife passed. He opened the door slow, eyed the plate. "Smells like somebody finally learned how to use their oven," he said. We sat on his porch, talking about the Bears, the lousy offensive line, the weather, property taxes, nothing important and somehow everything that mattered. There were stretches where neither of us said a word, just the sound of the street, a fork on a plate, the creak of the porch swing. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I actually enjoyed the silence between the words. The small, ordinary parts of life were starting to feel good again. 3 months after that night at St. Mark's, an envelope showed up in my mailbox from the county. No drama, no knock on the door, just paper. I sat at the kitchen table on Pinecrest, same spot I'd drunk 1,000 cups of morning coffee, and opened it with a butter knife. It was all there in legal language. The marriage was over. Whatever we'd been on paper no longer existed. I didn't crack a beer. I didn't call anybody. I just sat there and reached into the little ceramic dish by the salt shaker, where I'd dropped my wedding ring the day I moved back in. I turned it between my fingers, feeling the weight of it. For a long time, I'd been afraid to really look at it. I thought if I did, all I'd see was 24 wasted years. But staring at that ring in the late afternoon light, that's not what I felt. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't everything. It was a chapter. A long one. One that had good pages and brutal pages and needed to end when it did. My life, it turned out, was bigger than that circle of gold. That evening, I stood by the front window, looking out at Pinecrest Drive. The sun was dropping low, painting the little one-story houses in this soft gold that made everything look gentler than it really was. I thought about that bathroom, about Lisa, about Todd, about the years I'd spent trying to keep the boat steady while they were drilling holes in the bottom. "I'm no saint," I said out loud, to nobody in particular. "I've made my share of mistakes." I let that sit a second. But I didn't deserve what happened in that tub. For a while, I'd thought revenge would fix that feeling, make it even. But standing there at 56, I finally understood something. Peace hits different than revenge. Revenge is loud, hot, overfast. Peace is quieter, slower. It shows up in small moments, the way you sleep a little deeper, breathe a little easier, stop checking your phone, waiting for the next lie. I realized I still had some life left in me, some good years. They didn't get to take those too. I cracked the window. Cool air drifted in, carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass and somebody's grill going down the street. For the first time in a long time, that smelled like a future I actually wanted to live in. If you've listened this far, you already know more about my life than most people in my town do. So let me leave you with this. Turns out starting over at 56 isn't the end. It's just the first honest day of the rest of your life. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and somebody blew your world apart, cheating, lying, walking out, whatever it was, I want you to hear me clearly. You can get back up. You can keep your dignity. You don't have to throw dishes, punch walls, or burn your whole life down to prove you're hurting. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stay steady, tell the truth, and walk away from what's killing him. If this story gave you even a little bit of strength, don't keep that to yourself. Share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment. Tell your own story. Hit follow. Hit subscribe. Stick around. Your voice might be the one that gives some other guy the courage to take his first honest step out of the wreckage. And from one survivor to another, thanks for listening.